We're about to go into the part where you've got to let stretch your mind. You got to do things you really didn't do in the past. Here we say one of the most basic and yet dynamic laws of life is create or disintegrate. Now, do you know, it's a statement, it's a concept that we've probably heard many times. It's an absolute law. Nothing stays where it is. We are in a constant evolution of change. Every second, the law decrees, nothing rests. We literally live in an ocean of motion. And if we're not growing, we're going the other way. Now, the odds of you growing just, what do we use the words? Chance, accident? No. The odds of you growing without any conscious decisions on your part is slim. It's there, but it's slim. Now, some people are involved in that. They're in the minority. And they're what you call unconscious competence. But they are growing. They're not disintegrating. They're creating. But they don't understand what they're doing, and because they don't understand, they're missing one of the greatest opportunities in life. They're not sharing it. You go talk to that young lady who was up here last night, Karen Brooks. She is building something in Australia, but not just in Australia. That's immediate surroundings. She's building it all over the world. But it's so big, so phenomenal. Every expression of life is moving in one direction or another. Absolutely nothing will remain as it is. Now come down to line 248. The nucleus of your being is spiritual. You are a spiritual being. You are truly created in God's image. This is not a myth. Listen, one of the greatest rocket scientists that ever lived, considered the father of the space program, he said, after studying the spectacular mysteries of the cosmos, I have come into a firm belief in the existence of God. Now, this is a scientist. He said the natural laws are so precise that they had to be set by someone. Now, you might want to argue with that. That's fine if you do. Go ahead. I choose to listen to people that are as bright as him and as accomplished as him. See, he keeps it so simple in one respect. In another, it must be so complicated. We use it as a joke. What do you think? You're a rocket scientist or something? You know, when President Kennedy asked him what it would take to build the rocket that would go there and come back safely, he answered him in 5 words: the will to do it. Now, if you don't really understand your own personality, if you don't understand your own mental faculties, you would miss what he meant. He said, if you will develop one of the higher faculties that God gave you that separates you from all the rest of animal life, then we could do it. You'll have to develop it and you'll have to use it. The will to do it. The will gives us a focus. How do you think Phil got all that hardware? He had the will to do it. He focused. He did exactly what I told him. I said, Phil, I want you to read this. Now, I said it's maybe a little heavy reading, but read it anyway. Even if you don't understand it, read it. And just keep reading it. And one day you're going to think, wow. Wow. Now, if you sit down and had a serious, in-depth conversation with him, you'll probably realize that he really knows this stuff. Guy's been coming here every week. He comes, sits right in the front and soaks it up. He takes more notes than anybody I see. You know why? He wants to keep growing. You're an expression of spirit. Spirit's always for expansion and fuller expression, never for disintegration. All of nature expands and expresses itself in a greater way. Nature knows no failures. So do you see, you could say that's natural. Natural isn't what everybody does. Natural is nature's way. Come down the bottom. It says dissatisfaction is a built-in motivator. Now, my grandmother pretty well raised me, and she was a dear little lady. I mean, I loved her dearly, and I probably really aggravated her a lot of times, and I always borrowed money from Grandma. And Grandma would give it to me. It would be all bundled up, and she'd hook me. Now, I need this back. Now, shall I give it back, Grandma? I always give it back. She was my last hope. And she would watch us while Mother went to work so that she could earn enough to keep us. So she was like the warden. I mean, she was there all the time. And she was very good at laying guilt on us. I mean, God. When we ask for something, you should be satisfied with what you got. Your mother's working hard to keep you. And I knew I was going to hear that when I asked for something. You should be satisfied. You should. Grandma was wrong. She was wrong. Now, I used to think of her just as an angel of God. But she was wrong. I never thought she was wrong about anything as a kid. Grandma seemed to know everything. She was wrong. You should never be satisfied. Happy? Yeah. Dissatisfaction is a creative vibration that you get in. When you are sufficiently dissatisfied with how you're living, you'll change it. When you're satisfied, understand you're not going anywhere. Flip over to line 279. When you begin to think of how you're living and what you're doing relative to what you are capable of with the potential you possess. You may not really understand this. Maybe you're here. This might be your first exposure to this. Some of you have read a few books. Some of you have been to a few seminars. And so you think you maybe understand it. I've been studying this for 57 years, every day. And I know that I'm only scratching the surface. Begin to think of how you're living, what you're doing relative to what you're capable of, with the potential you possess. Keep thinking this way, and you can be sure dissatisfaction will set in if it hasn't already. You know, when you start to get comfortable, you want to start thinking, how could I get really dissatisfied with everything? On line 295, we must clearly stamp in our mind that all things are possible. We must never permit individual in positions of power to convince us otherwise. And I think we saw that in examples of it can't be done. Now flip over to page 42. As we go into this exercise, this is true make-believe. If you can't make believe, you're toast. There's a song by Nat King Cole. Download the song, put it on your phone, play it at least once or twice a day. It's pretend. Pretend. Well, look here now on line 205, or 305, pardon me. As images come on the screen of your mind that would represent a much more meaningful life, just ask yourself, do I want this? Now listen. This is very important. You pay attention here. Very important. This is where we're going to go. You got to ask yourself as images come on your mind. This is where you're going to be quiet. You're not going to disturb the person beside you. You don't want to break their trip. Ask yourself, when anything comes, do I want this? That is the only prerequisite. Now, if you're not used to doing this, and you probably aren't, most people aren't, it's not going to be an easy thing to do. Now, when it flashes on your mind, do I want this? That is the only prerequisite, is do I want it? Whether you can afford it is irrelevant. I don't care if you're in debt up to your ears. I don't care if you got the idea you'll never get out of debt. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Do you want it? That's all you have to ask. You don't have to know how you'll do it. You haven't got the foggiest idea how you do it. When I sat down in a den on Maplewood Lane in Glenview, Illinois, and I wrote on a piece of paper, I will build a company that operates all over the world. Now, I don't know where you are, but I know you're not where I am. You're somewhere in the world. Yet we found a medium. Since we can't go everywhere, we can be everywhere. Everyone, there's the way, it's here. Listen, listen, listen. And you'll find out how. And I want to tell you that you want to come back because we got lots of good information. Okay? Where the money will come from doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I like what wherever it is right now, that's where it's going to come from. It'll come. It'll just appear. I remember, some of you are very familiar with Catherine Ponder's books. When I first started to study her books. Somebody got me onto them. They're just thin little books. And like the dynamic laws of healing, dynamic laws of prosperity. And anyway, she tells stories about a person just wanting $5,000, and the next day a check arrived in the mail of $5,000. And I'm thinking, who the hell is going to believe this? This is such crap. This is not this good. Does she really believe people are going to? But I was reading it. I didn't ask myself, why do you keep reading, Proctor? You see? It happens. I've seen it happen. None, line 316, underline this. None of these limitations have any place in this exercise. This, I'm going to tell you, listen, as we get involved in this exercise, your mind is going to start to really screw around with your head. The only prerequisite, do you want it? Not do you need it, not could you do it. The only prerequisite is, do you want it? Now, as you identify various situations, write them down. Not a crystal clear image, just make a quick note on it. See? Over in line 332. Pardon me, 330. Or go back to 328, right at the top of the page. Remember, all you're doing is exploring. There's no decisions being made here. This is important. We are on an exploration trip here. This is important. I'm telling you, these things are important. These are critically important. This is what 9 out of 10 people never do. All you're doing is exploring. Daydreaming. What did Lawrence say? All men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their mind waken the day to find that it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dream with open eyes to make it possible. This I did. Listen, you eat enough of this and you're going to become it. Take the lid off your marvelous mind and dream. For goodness sake, give yourself the right to do that. Get your analytical mind out of the way. Put it in your pocket for a while. I don't have any difficulty with that. Remember, a woman one time told me I was a bihemispherical paraplegic. What she was really saying is half my brain I never utilized. That's the part where you really analyze situations. You think. I don't think, I just dream. Goal creators do not limit themselves. There's no reason why you cannot have the good you desire. If you can see yourself with it, your imagination is one of your most marvelous mental faculties. Do what all goal creators do and use it properly. Now listen. Turn over to page 44. I want you to put a big star up in the upper right-hand corner. Put 3 or 4 of them. I want this to become one of the most important pages in this book. This is, without question, one of the most important pages in a book. Genevieve B. Rand was the only student of Judge Thomas Troward. In my opinion, Thomas Troward is one of the greatest authors of the last 500 years. Bar none. He wrote the Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science, the Dory Lectures, Mental Science, the Law and the Word, creative writing. You know, just so much good stuff. Bible mystery, Bible meaning. Phenomenal author. He only ever had one student. Just one. Genevieve B. Rand. She memorized what is on this page. This is what she claims put her in his presence to study. She was an American woman. She had to move to England. She had to come up with $20,000 in 1912. You might just jot that down on a piece of paper, and then when you have time, look on your phone and figure out how much is that in today's dollars. It is a lot of money. She had absolutely no idea how she could come up with the $20,000, but she had to, if she wanted to study with him. And this wasn't something that was offered ever to anyone else. She was his only student. Now, I'm his student. But I never sat down with him. He was gone long before I arrived. I consider his books the most valuable ones in my library. And when Phil told me he was serious, I said, how fast do you want to do it? He said, I'd like to do it yesterday. And that's when I told him. I said, Phil, you got to do exactly what I tell you. He said, I will. I said, okay. I gave him the Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science. For a person that's never studied this, that was probably one of the most difficult books in the world to read. Not only because of its content, but the way it's written. It today is coupled with another book, the Dory Lectures on Mental Science. They published them together now. But the Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science was the first book that he studied. I began to study that in 1968 because Earl Nightingale was studying it. I didn't have any idea what I was reading. Absolutely none. I mean, I was in the dark. I was reading it, and I didn't know what I was reading. However, that's what Earl was reading, so I thought that's what I got to be reading. And I've never stopped reading it. This is so important. My mind is a center of divine operation. Now, let's just think of that. Do you know the most important letter or word in this whole piece of literature or in that whole book is a? My mind is a center. A center. Didn't say it's the center. Now you really got to think. You got to think, where's this kite coming from? What is this? Now think of this for a moment. If I held a basketball in my hand, you know the basketball has a center to it. Now, I don't know how to find it, but I do know you have to know the outer measurements of the ball if you're going to find out where the center is. I know you have to know that. But how you'd figure out, I haven't got the foggiest idea, but I know you can. Yet that's based on the outer ring. There is a center in this room. Now, I don't know where it is, and I don't know how to find it, but I do know there is one. There's a center in everything, but there's only one center. Just one. Nothing has two centers. Everything has one. Isn't it strange? My mind is a center. It would indicate there's more than one. You see, it's only after I really got into this serious study. And then I mentally try and get into the energy of the author. And I might read this. It might take me a week just to read it once through. My mind is a center of divine operation. Isn't that interesting? My mind is a center. There's more than one. How could there be more than one? There isn't any outer ring. There's no outside measurement. You're dealing with something that's infinite. Therefore, any point is center. Everyone. There's as much on the right as there is on your left. There's as much above as there is below. There's much in front as there is behind. Your mind is the center of divine operation. Wow. Me, Bob. My mind is the center of divine operation. Then she says the divine operation is always for expansion and fuller expression. So powerful. This divine operation's always for expansion and fuller expression. Now, if you're going to get in harmony with this power, if you're not expanding and expressing in a greater way, you're not in harmony with the power. If you're not in harmony with the power, you're not operating by law. If you're not operating by law, you're going to lose. I don't give a damn what you're doing, you're going to lose. If you are, you're going to win. I don't care how many people tell you you can't, you will win. Doesn't matter about all the evidence of why you can't. The Wright brothers were certainly surrounded by sufficient evidence that you couldn't fly. They were bicycle mechanics. Their dad was an Orthodox minister. Yet he suggested that they would burn in hell for trying to fly. I didn't stop them. They introduced us to a new kingdom. They did something that couldn't be done because they understood all things are possible. This means the production of something beyond what's gone before. Something entirely new, not included in my past experience, though it's proceeding out of my past experience by an orderly sequence of growth. You know what that means? That means that everything that's happened, everything has been necessary to make you who you are, to prepare you to do what you're going to do. You know all those nasty little things you don't want anybody to know about? They were necessary. You know all the good things? They were all everything. This means the production of something beyond what's gone before. Something entirely new, not included in my past experience, though it's proceeding out of my past experience by an orderly sequence of growth. Order. In another place that he wrote, order is heaven's first law. Yeah, it's kind of cool. It says, therefore, since the divine cannot change its inherent nature, kind of cool, it must operate the same manner within me. Consequently, in my special world, of which I am the center, it will always move me forward to produce new conditions, always in advance of any that's gone before. By their fruits you'll know them. You can't hide it. Anybody can figure out which track you're on. All they have to do is watch you. Look at your results. You want to know how well you're doing? Look at your results. Do you know, it doesn't matter how many really good excuses you got. They don't cut it. The worst thing can happen to a person when they're working on a goal is to have an excuse. If there's anything worse than that, it's to have a good excuse. You know? Now, I read a long time ago, and I believe it's true, in every project, there's escape hatches. Now, when I think of that, I was in the Navy, and I know what a hatch is, an escape hatch, and that's what I see. I see these little scuttles that you could crawl through, and then they lock them up airtight. And he said, this author said, in every project there's escape hatches. If you don't bolt them closed, when going gets tough, you'll hit the escape hatch. Block all forms of exit. There is no exit. A lot of people, when they start a company, they have an exit plan. I never had an exit plan. Never. The idea of doing something else? Never. Never. This is so important. Consequently, in my own special world of which I am the center, it will always move me forward to produce new conditions, always in advance of anything that's ever gone before. All those good things, it's going to go beyond that. This is so big. It's so important.
I hope you enjoyed this video. We put a lot of good information up here, and it causes everything in your life to get better. If you'd like us to notify you every time we put a new video up, hit subscribe and then turn on notifications. Check out all our videos, and we will notify you when we put a new one up.